What's up guys, my name is Ace, and welcome back to another gun guide. This is the series where I cover all of the stats of every one of the guns in Modern Warfare. In today's episode, we're going to be sticking to the SMG category and moving on to the P90. And first up, let's have a look at the damage profile. And just like we expect with all of the SMGs, we get reduced damage to the limbs. However, our torso damage multiplier is 25, 20, 18, 15, and this means it's going to be a 4 to 7 shot kill as long as you're hitting the torso and not the arms or legs. As for our headshot multiplier, this is standard at 1.6, which means our headshot damage profile is 40, 32, 29, 24. And this means that headshots are generally great, but up close at least, you will have to hit more than just one headshot mixed in with body shots in order to reduce the number of shots it's going to take you to kill. As for our rate of fire, it's quite fast at 923 rounds per minute, and this means our minimum time to kill to the torso is going to be 195 milliseconds up close, which is very solid, and it will drop off to 390 milliseconds in the 7-shot kill range, which, considering it's 7 shots a kill, that's actually not a terrible time to kill. As for our time to kill potential, assuming we hit at least 2 headshots up close, this is 130 milliseconds, which is very, very fast. Moving on to our ranges, as you can see here, our 4-shot kill range is not too bad for the SMG category at about 13 meters. Then our 5-shot kill range is just a little bit under 20 meters, and then after that, our 6-shot kill range will reach out to just over 25 meters. And overall, this is a pretty standard range profile for an SMG in this game. As for suppressors, just like with all of the guns, the lightweight suppressor will reduce all of our range values by 25%, and the monolithic suppressor will increase our range values by just 7.5%. Taking that into hardcore game modes, the P90 is always going to be at least a 2-shot kill to the body in hardcore. You can get a 1-shot headshot that extends out to about 18 meters, but aside from that, it's going to take you 2 shots to kill, and at extremely long ranges, if you're shooting them in the limbs, it can take you up to 3 shots to kill with this gun. Moving on to hipfire, this is pretty solid and standard for the SMG category. And when it comes to idle sway, we've got pretty decent idle sway properties here. It does move around a little bit while aiming down sight, but it's really not that bad. This brings us to recoil, and as you can see here, this kicks upwards and to the right. It's very consistent, very predictable recoil, and this means it's quite easy to control as well. It's also worth noting there isn't much of a gap between bullets, so it doesn't jump up suddenly by any means. Like I said, it's really consistent. It also doesn't bounce around side to side much, and therefore you can be quite accurate with this gun with just a little bit of recoil control. Getting into handling, we've got an excellent aim down sight time at just 200 milliseconds. This is tied for the best in the SMG category. And our sprint out times are standard for SMGs at 133 milliseconds for the standard sprint out time. And our super sprint out time, or our tactical sprint out time, is also standard at 217 milliseconds. Our magazine capacity is great at 50 rounds with 100 in reserve, although keep in mind you can burn through those pretty quickly due to the high rate of fire. Our reload add time is 2.09 seconds, which is the slowest in the SMG category. It does take quite a long time to reload this, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. And you may want to use sleight of hand, which will cut that reload add time down to 1.57 seconds, which is a pretty standard reload time for the rest of the SMGs without sleight of hand. Getting into our movement speed, this is pretty standard for SMGs at 97%, and our aim down sight stray speed is also right around average for SMGs at 54%. So that pretty much covers it for the standard base stats on the P90 without attachments. However, this gun has quite a few unique attachments that the other guns don't have. So let's start going through those. The first one is the Forged Tack Retribution Barrel, and this big ugly thing increases our damage ranges by 35%, which is quite a nice boost to our damage range. On top of that, it gives us increased bullet velocity, which will help hitting our targets at longer ranges, and also it improves our recoil control, which, as you can see here, it does keep those bullets a little bit closer together. There's a bit less side-to-side bounce, and it doesn't kick upwards quite as much as without the barrel. But like I said earlier, the base P90 is already very accurate and easy to control, so I would say this is pretty unnecessary. Now these upsides do come at the cost of a very noticeably slower aim down sight time. It's now going to be 250 milliseconds with this barrel on, which is about 20% slower. And on top of that, your overall movement speed is reduced by roughly 3%, which again, that's quite noticeable. So we got some pretty solid upsides, but also very noticeable downsides. As for the only other barrel that we have access to with the P90, this is the FSS 10.6-inch Pro barrel, and with this one we get a 20% boost to all of our damage ranges, so not nearly as much as the Forged Tack, but it's still a pretty nice boost, and in addition to that we still get a boost to our bullet velocity. Now the cons on this aren't nearly as bad as the Forge Tack. With this, all it does is add 1 frame to your aim down sight time, so you aim down sight roughly 8% slower. And that's really not all that bad for the benefits that you gain from this. Moving on to the next unique attachment, this is one that only appears on the P90 in this game so far at least. This is the fly strap in the stock section. And with this one, your sprint out time is 25% faster, which is a very noticeable boost to your sprint out time. I don't know if it's really necessary, but if you're really looking for a near instant sprint out time, this helps quite a bit. And on top of that, we get a very solid increase to our aim down sight stray speed. This will improve it by roughly 12%. And all of this just comes at the cost of aiming stability, so you're going to have a bit more idle sway. As for the next set of attachments, these are also unique, although they might sound very similar. These are the grip tapes that apply to the underbarrel section of the P90. We also still have the rear grip tapes, and those aren't unique. You see those on pretty much all of the guns in the game. Keep in mind the ones I'm talking about here apply to the underbarrel category. And first up, we have the granulated grip tape. This one just improves your idle sway a little bit, and that does come at the cost of movement speed. It slows you down by roughly 1%, which is hardly noticeable. Next up, we have the stippled grip tape, and with this one, we get better recoil control, which, as you can see here, this is actually a pretty similar reduction to our recoil as we saw with the Forge Tack barrel, which again is a nice little boost, but it's really not necessary in my opinion for this gun. And on top of that, we do get an improvement to our aiming stability. These upsides do come at the cost of a slightly slower aim down sight time. It's about 15% slower, or 2 frames at 60 FPS. And also, we get a pretty significant reduction to our aim down sight stray speed. This is reduced by roughly 11%, which is very noticeable. So finally, for these underbarrel grip tapes, we have the rubberized grip tape, and with this one, we get improved recoil control, which, once again, this looks very similar to all of the other attachments that help with your recoil control, and it's really not necessary in my opinion. And this does come at the cost of a 15% slower aim down sight time, which, in my opinion at least, just isn't worth using for the P90. And with that, that pretty much covers it for all of the unique attachments on the P90, and it's finally time to start getting into some great attachment combinations as well as some excellent example class setups. And first up, this is my favorite way to run the P90 while being super aggressive. With this, we're using the 10.6-inch barrel, we're using the 1 milliwatt laser for the hip fire, we've got that fly strap stock on for a really fast sprint out time, as well as improved aim down sight stray speed, which can be great in mid-range gunfights. For our weapon perk, we've got sleight of hand, just because, like I said, even though we have a 50-round magazine, you can burn through those very quickly, and the base reload time is very, very slow for an SMG, especially if you're right up in the enemy's face all the time. And therefore sleight of hand helps quite a bit. And finally, we've got the stippled pistol grip, which is going to help a little bit with our aim down sight time. It'll counteract the negative effects of the barrel. And on top of that, we get an even better sprint out time when you combine that with the fly strap stock. The sprint out time on this is nearly instant. This is an excellent setup if you're playing something like Shoot House or Shipment, for instance, or even other maps if you just want to be super aggressive and up in the enemy's face. Taking this into an example class setup, with this we've got the Desert Eagle as our secondary, we've got EOD for perk 1, Hardline for perk 2 because we're just going to be aggressive and we want to get those streaks up as quickly as possible, and finally Battle Hardened just to help us a little bit when you get stunned or flashed. For our lethal, this is a C4, which I find to be one of the better pieces of equipment if you're being hyper aggressive, and of course for our tactical we've got the Stim Shot, which just helps you get back in the fight after taking damage. This right here is one of my favorite super aggressive class setups to use in the entire game. As for the next attachment combination though, this one's a lot more balanced. With this, once again, we do have the 10.6-inch Pro barrel, which is really nice to use on the P90, but this time we do have the Solo Zero reflex sight, which is kind of nice if you don't really like the iron sights or if you want to stretch out a little bit to try and hit your target at longer ranges. Now, once again with this, we do have sleight of hand as well as that stippled pistol grip. These are both excellent attachments, and I would use that on pretty much any P90 setup that I've got. But we've also got the rubberized grip tape on our underbarrel attachment, which will help with our recoil a little bit, and this pairs nicely with the Solo Zero reflex, so that we can feel a bit more confident in those mid to somewhat longer range gunfights, while still being very solid as an up-close gun. Taking that into an example class setup, this one's designed more for ground war, and with this, once again, we've got that Desert Eagle as our secondary, EOD for our first perk, Kill Chain for our second perk, because we can hang back a little bit more with this gun. You don't want to be picking people off at super long ranges, but I'm thinking more like mid to somewhat long range for an SMG at least. And also we've got Shrapnel on there combined with the Thermite so that we can take out vehicles very easily. This just leaves us with our tactical, which is once again a Stim Shot. I really like the Stim Shot lately, so I've been using it on a lot of my class setups. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's gun guide on the P90. As for my thoughts on this gun, I would say they're pretty mixed. I've had a lot of success with the P90 being very aggressive and playing super close quarters with it, but then there's other times where it just seems like this gun doesn't work for me. It's some sort of inconsistency, and I can't quite figure out what that inconsistency is. But generally speaking, I do feel a bit more confident with either an MP5 or an MP7 in my hands. However, I would not consider the P90 to be a lower tier weapon by any means. You can really find a lot of success with this gun. It just seems a bit inconsistent, like I said. But of course, I'd like to know in the comment section below, what do you guys think of the P90 in Modern Warfare? And also, if you guys have missed any of the previous episodes of my gun guides, I will leave a link to the playlist down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.